When it comes to student loans, not all loans are created equal. In general, federal student loans are cheaper and safer for borrowers than private student loans. So understand which student loans you're considering. Everybody should fill out the free application for federal student aid. They call it the FAFSA. That's how you get eligible to borrow federal loans. And federal loans have important protections for student loan borrowers, like flexible repayment provisions and forgiveness provisions, cancellation provisions, ways to temporarily postpone making payments if you should need those sorts of tools. So private loans, on the other hand, tend to be more risky and expensive for borrowers. The private loans typically are based on the credit of the borrower. So a lot of students haven't had a chance to establish a long credit history, and so won't have especially stellar credit, even if they've always paid bills on time. And so private loans usually don't have terms that are as good as federal loans. They tend to have higher interest rates, oftentimes variable rates that go up over time, and sometimes those variable interest rates have no cap, which can be very risky and potentially expensive for the borrower of such loans. So my advice is always look to federal student loans first. You are eligible for federal student loans by filling out the free application for federal student aid. And then definitely borrow as little as you can. I do think that college is still a great investment. People who have degrees do better financially and in the job market than people who do not. But cost does matter, and there are more and less affordable options when it comes to college education. I mean, in general, education is really expensive. So understand that if you're like me and you don't come from a family with a lot of financial resources, then you may need to borrow some student loans. You can look to federal student loans, but you cannot necessarily afford your first choice school. Maybe you can, maybe you can't, but cost is something to keep in mind, because every dollar you borrow is going to have to be repaid later with interest, which gets expensive potentially. So some good news about how to manage federal student loans if you have student debt. There are some really interesting repayment options available for folks. So what you want to do is understand what your options are and then choose a repayment strategy that works best for you depending on your circumstances. So one of the newer kinds of repayment options is a category I refer to as the income-driven repayment options. And those income-driven options include income-based repayment, something called income-contingent repayment, and then the very new pay-as-you-earn repayment provision. These are worth considering if you have relatively high student loan debt as compared to your income. So people who have low incomes for whatever reason, maybe unemployed or in the job market looking for the right job, maybe working part-time or underemployed as they call it. Also a good option for people who are working but whose salaries just aren't keeping pace with the amount of their student loan debt. So for example, a lot of folks who have expensive graduate and professional degrees are looking at the income-driven repayment options. There's lots of different options, and when you're thinking about student loan repayment, you really want to start from the proposition that the longer it takes you to repay your debt, the more you're going to pay over time. But you've got to have a monthly payment that you can afford. So what you want to do is find that right balance between what you can afford to pay now, and also at the same time minimizing your total cost over time. So you kind of want to pay stuff back as fast as you can in general. I mean, that's what saves you money over time, but you certainly don't want to be in a position where you've selected a repayment plan that has a monthly payment that you can't afford, because that's not cool. One thing to keep in mind about these income-driven options, they have forgiveness provisions associated with those repayment plans. And so for people who make payments for an extended period of time, 20 or 25 years, depending on the repayment provision, could have some of their student loans canceled if there were balances remaining after making payments for so long. So for those people who either have high enough debt that applies, or who have low enough incomes as compared to their debt over time, that forgiveness is a possibility. Now, under current law, if you earned any of the forgiveness, it would be taxed, and it would be taxed as income to you. So in general, when a loan is forgiven, that is seen as a financial benefit, clearly, to the person who receives that forgiveness. And so the current rule is that they would be taxed as income in the year it was received. That can be managed, and it can be, still beneficial to the student loan borrower, but it's just important to recognize it and plan for it. And also, I would say, be aware of possible changes or efforts to change that law. Throw in your 2 cents with whatever your opinion may be about that. Another thing to keep in mind for forgiveness for federal student loans is the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. This is a great option for people who want careers in government or nonprofit positions. So folks who are working full-time in government and nonprofit positions may be able to earn forgiveness of their student loans after 10 years of making payments. The provisions of public service loan forgiveness are tricky. There are a lot of details that are important. So if you're planning a career in public service, be sure that you get all the right information about that, because it can be super beneficial. And interestingly and luckily, that forgiveness, public service loan forgiveness, is not taxable as income to the borrower. So it's treated differently than the forgiveness under the income-driven options, and it's not taxable. So other sources of good information for people thinking about student debt. My website has tons of stuff. I'm Heather Jarvis. My website's askheatherjarvis.com. You'll find a lot of information, especially about public service loan forgiveness and the income-driven options. The Department of Education has some excellent information and calculators on their website. I'm also a big fan of the National Consumer Law Center and the information they provide through a website which is studentloanborrowerassistance.org. And then, as I mentioned, the FAFSA online is the place to start, the free application for federal student aid. And then if you're looking to get an inventory of your loans, if you've got debt you're trying to figure out and manage, start by visiting the National Student Loan Data System. That's nslds.ed.gov.